everyone, my name is Ridima and I welcome you to yet another intriguing episode of my show called the Ridima Wali Show, a platform created to get some of the most successful people share their stories of hustle and grind right before they arrived at what they wanted to do in life. And today I have the privilege of hosting two global thought leaders of my show, and I think luck was in my favor that they agreed to come on my show. Our first guest is a legendary coach. I think legendary coach is also an understatement for him, who has transformed the lives of numerous leaders, executives the world over through his consistent mission of helping people achieve lasting and positive changes in behavior and make their lives a little better. He is acknowledged by some of the illustrious bodies like Bloomberg Thinkers 50 as the world's rated #1 executive coach. I'm talking about Marshall Goldsmith. Hi, Marshall. Thank you and welcome on my show. It's a pleasure having you on my show, Marshall.
Love to work with you. Thank you so much.
Namaste.
Thank you.
And we've also got the company of a very special second guest who is cited by Forbes as the world's premier expert on leadership development for women. And she's an author, speaker, and a thinker whose mission is to help women identify, articulate, and act on their greatest strengths. Please join me in welcoming Sally Helgesen.
Yay.
Sally, welcome to our show.
Wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much, guys,
pleasure.
for joining us on my show called the Ridima Wali Show. And I understand that you guys have recently collaborated together to bring this maverick called How Women Rise. Yes. So today we're going to talk about the book, and we'd also like to get to know you guys a little better by delving into your childhood and really trying to understand your journey of how you reached where you did. Okay. So I'm really excited to have you both on my show. Marshall and Sally, what I'd like to know from both of you is that your friendship goes back for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So tell us about this association, this friendship that has turned into such a strong professional association.
Glad to do that. I met Marshall in 1995. Mm-hmm. We were both speaking at an event for the Peter Drucker Institute out in San Diego, where Marshall lives. I'd been invited. I was doing a keynote. Marshall was delivering a workshop at the time. Mm-hmm. And we hit it off. We enjoyed one another's company. And that evening, Marshall invited all the guests, there were about 100 of them, to a big party at his house. And again, we continued to talk. And then sometime shortly after that, Marshall began a group called the Learning Network. He just invited a bunch of people he wanted to get to know better and to come out and spend a weekend in San Diego at a hotel. And we've been together, that same group, for 25 years since.
25 years?
Yes.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
So, Marshall, I'm intrigued to ask you, what's the secret sauce of maintaining friendship that long?
I think a lot of it is the group. I mean, everybody in the original group is still not there, 25 years later. The secret is really getting people with a like-minded interest. And our group went through many evolutions. We started out a little more on the academic side, a little of the show and tell. And I'd say the first program, everyone was kind of pompous and trying to show off. And, it was a smartness contest. And then after a few years, people tired of that. And then we sort of, how can we help each other do business? And then we tried to save the world. And then after a while, we said, look, why don't we just be friends for each other and try to help each other? The reality is most of the people in the group, like us, we're in the helping others business. And we don't get a whole lot of time for who's helping you business. So it's a group of people who we have a lot in common. We travel, we know what life is like in our lives. And so it's a wonderful group. We're great friends. We've known each other for years and helped each other in many different ways.
And is this friendship only restricted to the realm of the professional world, or does it get translated into personal equations, friendships? Does the family meet? I'm inquisitive to know that.
Yeah, it's become a group where we have a lot of close connections, and many of us know one another's families. We've had people in the group who've traveled with one another's families, so it really has become a very significant part of our lives. I think one thing that's important is that everybody in the group pretty much works on their own. So it's a way of having close colleagues and developing that in a situation that it can be kind of hard to do that.
Yeah, also you see the drama of life.
Yeah.
Again, 25 years, people die, get divorced, parents die, success, failure. So you get to see the drama of life. And one thing we always say in the group is that you can't buy history. You can't buy history with people. You can't buy 25 years of relationship. That just has to come over time.
Yeah.
And the day to day and seeing what happens in life. And it's been very, very useful to see the drama of life, you know. Yeah.
I like the phrase you said, you can't buy history.
Right.
Time. Yeah. Marshall, for the world, you are this luminary coach, a legend in his own right. I'm just inquisitive to know, how was Marshall as a kid?
As a kid, I was brought up in a small town called Valley Station, Kentucky, and my father had a small gasoline station. And my mother was a first grade school teacher. She went to college for 2 years, which is unusual. But my father had this silly idea that women shouldn't work.
Women shouldn't work?
No.
Okay.
So that's the bad news is we were very poor. The good news is all of her first grade school teacher energy was devoted to one student, me. It was all me. So I knew how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide before I went to school. Now you can imagine I'm from a very low income, low education neighborhood. So I go to school, I'm 6. The teacher goes, 1 + 1 is 2. I go, yeah. I look around.
What's a big deal?
It's a big, no one knows this but me. I'm sitting there looking around going, oh my God. You know what I told my mother when I went home?
Yeah.
I said, I'm the smartest person that ever lived.
That's the good news.
I'm the smartest person that ever lived. And I looked around and I thought, what a planet. I said, if you can't be a success on this planet, you're a loser. The competition is weak here. Well, again, the middle school down the street where I was brought up last year came in next to last place in Kentucky in academic achievement, and Kentucky comes in near the bottom of America. So this is really down the food chain where I'm from. So the odds on me being where I am from where I'm from are close to 0. The only difference was my mother that gave me this sense of teaching and learning and all that. So it's a very, very young boy.
And, during your formative years or later part of the life, when did you discover that you had this penchant for coaching and leadership development? When did you discover that calling?
Well, what happened is one of the members of our group was Dr. Paul Hersey. He was the world's authority in organizational behavior at the time. He and Ken Blanchard invented situational leadership, and I just randomly had a chance to meet him and follow him around, and I tried to learn what he did, and he was kind enough to let me, carry the bags, and I was a junior helper, and then one day he became double booked. And he said, look, can you do what I do? I said, I don't know. He said, I need help. Can you do this? I said, I don't know. He said, I will pay you $1,000 for one day if you can do this. That was 28 years ago. No, excuse me, that's 41 years ago. I was 28 years old. 41 years ago, $1,000 for one day to a kid was a lot of money.
It still is a lot now.
Well, you know what? I was making $15,000 for 1 year. You know what I said? Sign me up, coach. So I did this program for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. They were very angry when I showed up because it wasn't him. Yet there was a 2-week program, many speakers. I was ranked first place of all the speakers. They loved me. So they called Paul and said, hey, well, we were very angry, but this guy did great. Can you send him again? Paul said, do you want to do this again? I said, sign me up. That's how I got into leadership development. And then a lot of life is luck. Coaching, the same thing. I'm working with a guy who's the CEO of a big company. There was nothing called coaching. And he said, I got this kid working for me, young, smart, dedicated, hardworking, driven to achieve, jerk. He said it would be worth a fortune to me if I could turn a guy around, change his behavior. So I heard that word fortune. I said, I like fortunes. Maybe I can help him. He said, I doubt it. I said, maybe I can help him. He said, I don't think so. Then I said, came up with an idea. I said, look, I'll work with him for a year. If the guy gets better, pay me. Does not get better, it's all free. You know what he said? Sold. That's how I got into coaching. There was nothing called coaching.
So, Marshall, in this mini story, I'm inquisitive to know, you said, Paul Hersey was double booked and you got your first chance to speak.
Right.
When do you think you got this time to really prepare for that role? When did that preparatory thing happen?
Some things are hard work and some things are a gift. That was a gift.
It was a gift?
It was a gift. I was 28 years old. I didn't work that hard.
You didn't?
No, I was 28 years old. This was not a matter of extreme dedication and hard work or me being a good human being. I mean, I do work very hard, and I have worked very hard for many years. Writing 39 books, that was hard. That was a gift.
That was a gift.
I just love it. So I think that's something that comes from the heart. I love speaking, I love teaching. And although I was way too young and inexperienced to be there, I think the audience picks up, this guy loves this.
Yeah.
And they liked it. And it was a very positive experience for them. And so that's a gift. So part of it is hard work and part of it is a gift. That part is a gift.
That part is a gift.
That wasn't hard work.
Okay. That is a candid confession.
Yeah.
But one thing that clearly stands out, sorry, no but.
No
as per
but,
your rule. I know, right? I'm inquisitive to know, was that opportunity an opportunity for you to discover that speaking is what you really love?
It was. And again, what I did that was smart in hindsight is I didn't have an ego problem. I didn't mind carrying his bags.
Yeah.
I didn't mind being a helper. I didn't mind being junior to him. I didn't mind sitting in the back of the room. And because of that, he was able to teach me what he learned. And then when my chance came, when my opportunity came, I was ready. So I don't think it was so much a hard work issue. What was good, though, is I showed I wasn't so egotistical that I was above carrying the bags.
And that also demonstrated your humility towards work.
If it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have got the chance.
Interesting.
One other thing happened back in Kentucky that influenced my life. I was 14, and we were very poor, and the roof was leaking. And so we hired a man, Dennis Mudd, to fix the roof. So to save money, my father had me help Dennis Mudd with the roof. So I helped Dennis Mudd. And we worked very hard on the roof, and it was very hard to make a roof, right? Probably one of the hardest jobs I ever had in the summer. It was hot. And we finished. He worked so hard, and we were so proud. So he looked at my father, his name was Bill, and he said, Bill, I would like you to inspect the roof. He said, if this roof is of high quality, pay me. If it is not of high quality, it's all free. Now, Dennis Mudd was poor, very poor. He needed the money. But I looked at him, I was 14, you know what I said? I want to be like him. I had so much respect for him. I want to be like him. And I don't think I've ever showed as much dignity as him. Because if I don't get paid, my life goes on. But he needed the money.
And yet he said if it won't turn out good, he won't take the money.
That's right.
Is it also the reason that why in your coaching sessions that you offer to your clients, you say if it is not an effective coaching, all your money will be back? Is
That's
that
right.
drawing the same?
Oh yeah, and everything I do is always speaking, anything. If there's any dissatisfaction, I never charge anyone for anything. Okay. I learned that from him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Some analogies I think have a profound impact, and this is one of them.
14.
Yeah.
I never forgot it.
Yeah.
I wrote a story about it in a magazine, and someone read it and sent me an email, and he said, after he quit putting on roofs, he drove a school bus. And he would talk to me every day after school and try to help me. And this young man ended up being the small business person of the year from Kentucky. And he said, largely because of him. So sometimes, our heroes are not always these big famous people.
They can be anywhere.
Anyone, poor people. Yeah.
Sally, I'm intrigued to ask you, how was your childhood like? And, whatever research I did about you, one thing which hit conspicuously is you're an expert on women leadership. So I'm also curious to know why not leadership? Why women leadership? But first, I want to ask you your roots. Where are you from? How was your childhood like?
I grew up in the Midwest in Michigan. My parents were both college teachers, so it had a big emphasis on education. And I think there was the assumption that I would become a college teacher. But I was really interested in being a writer and having a lot of the kinds of experiences a writer has. So I came to New York after college and did all kinds of writing. I did advertising writing. I worked as a reporter. I worked as a crime reporter. I did all kinds of different things. And finally, in the 1980s, I ended up as a speechwriter in corporate communications, which I really enjoyed. And when I was working in that field, however, it was the 1980s, and it was astonishing to me what a poor job the organizations I worked for did of understanding the value that the women who were beginning to work in them had to contribute. They really just didn't have any way of knowing. The women's voices weren't heard. I knew that there were really talented women. I knew I was very talented. And I was kind of fascinated by the fact that there was this pool of talent that the organizations didn't really seem to know how to use. So I became interested in that, and I decided to write a book about what women had to contribute as leaders, just because there wasn't one. In the 1980s, when women were really starting to move into the workplace, there were a lot of books being written for women, but every one of them had a negative focus. Women hadn't played football, so they didn't understand teamwork. That was all kind of a negative focus, and this is both academic and popular. And I thought they were on the wrong track, and I wanted to study how some of the best women leaders led organizations. So I was able to get a contract for that, and ended up writing a book that it's called The Female Advantage, Women's Ways of Leadership, which really is the first book that focused on what women had to contribute rather than how they needed to change and adapt. I backed into that. I didn't have any academic training in it. I was always, my path was in history and the arts. But I was so fascinated by what I saw, and the response to that book was very big. I think because of timing, it was just right timing. First time somebody addressed that subject. So people started looking at me as an expert, and I thought, oh, I'm not an expert, I'm a writer. I'm just a writer. And then finally I thought, get over that, accept it. If people want to look at you as an expert, I'll be an expert. So I found the topic fascinating. I have written other books that are in the leadership field but don't necessarily relate to
Focus
women.
On women,
Most notably probably The Web of Inclusion. But that idea came from the women's leadership. So it's just been something that I've been very comfortable with and felt that I could make a contribution. And now that I've been doing that, writing about women in organizations and organizations for 30 years, I feel like I really have built up a body of work, and I'm quite comfortable being in the situation that I'm in.
Sure. And in your view, Sally,
yes,
how important is the role of failures and rejection in the journey of becoming successful?
Well, everybody I know who has become successful has gone through periods of real pain, I would say. Whether it's loneliness, whether it's a failure, sometimes in personal relationships, or often in business failures. A great idea that you have that you think is bound to work that won't. I myself experienced tremendous fear and pain during the recession we had in 2008. It was one of the most frightening periods of my life. Work just kind of evaporated. And I'm grateful for that because it really taught me a resilience that I didn't know I had. And I had to change a lot of how I approached things. I became much more careful and more frugal, and I would say less grandiose. One of the things I did in the recession was I looked back over all the invitations that I'd gotten to speak, and I saw that I'd turned down a lot of things, and that I thought, no, I'm not really, I don't feel like going to Pittsburgh that week or whatever, And what I realized that if I'd been a little more grateful for the work that I had and had turned down less, I wouldn't have gotten hit as badly. So it really changed a lot of my feelings about my ability to cope in the world. And that's what I've seen with everybody who's been successful, especially people who are in a field that they, to some degree, where they make up what they do. They made it out of thin air. That's true with Marshall. True. It's true with me. Just made it up. That's not going to be. Yeah, exactly.
You created it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there was nothing there. Right. Yeah. That's the definition of creativity.
Right.
And what has been your favorite failure or favorite rejection, Marshall?
I've been rejected many times. Fortunately, I was able to get married after a series of a very long list of rejections. So happy there. Right? Thank God I've been married 44 years. I was worried about getting divorced. I was happy to be married in the first place. Right? So
survival crashes, man.
Yeah, when I did get married, my mother said to my wife, she said, I failed. Now it's your turn. If it doesn't work out, I won't blame you.
Marshall.
So I've had several rejections in life. One that was very helpful to me was the high school football team. I got rejected. I was cut from the high school football team, which broke my heart, But in hindsight, it was wonderful. I'm not going to be a football player. Who am I getting here, right? I'm a terrible athlete trying to grow up. So just accepting things is important. Another one is being bald. I was 25, and I used to comb my hair over, and I fell asleep. And they cut it off even on both sides. So I combed it over, only went that far. I looked so silly.
I'm just wondering, how did Marshall look like then?
It was so silly. I said, you're bald. Make peace, right? Yeah. Make peace. That's in the book, Triggers. And once you accept things, life is much better. I'm not an athlete. Okay, I'm not an athlete. I'm bald. I'm not an athlete. So once you can kind of accept things, that's a good thing about failure. Also, you don't waste a lot of time on things you're not going to succeed. Just check. How about this? No. So I think you don't have to be the world's expert on 1,000 things. I learned that from my friend Paul Hersey. I said, be the world's expert on something.
Okay. And, Marshall and Sally, this is a question for both, and I would like to invite your perspectives that, people who are in the journey of starting a career or figuring out what they want to do in the age group of 30 to 35, they are typically, trying out a lot of things at work and in personal life, whether they want to be in corporates, whether they want to be an entrepreneur. How to keep that inner compass of discovering what you're meant to do? How do you find that? Do you have any perspectives on that? How do people figure out what they truly want to do in life?
Well, I think that it's important not to close off avenues too early. Where I often hear college students will say, I can't decide what to major in, and they'll be having kind of a crisis about it. I can't decide what I want to do. Your path evolves, and I've just watched not just my own path, but if I look at the colleagues and friends I have, you couldn't have predicted what they ended up doing when they were, if you looked at them, say in their late 20s, there is no possible way you could have predicted it. And I think the important thing is to try to maintain a kind of an open attitude as you discover what really interests you enough to get you up and get you going day after day, year after year. Because that's really what it's about. You need to be engaged yourself.
Yeah.
Your organization can't engage you
Yeah.
if it's not work that you feel that you have a passion for, that work that you feel that you're suited for. So I often just caution people, don't close avenues off too early. Wait, keep it open and wait and see what really grabs you. There is absolutely no way I could have predicted anything in my path that would have predicted that I would end up being an expert on women's leadership. Nothing, not in my education, not even necessarily in my interests. And that book, The Female Advantage, was published. I was almost 40 years old, and that's where I found, oh, okay, that really works for me. Lots of my interests come together here. Lots of who I am, the way in which women see me, and I kind of got a big sister thing going because I'm the oldest girl in a big family. So people have always related to me that way. So I just felt comfortable with it. But I think it's important not to feel like I've got to find it. If you
will eventually
stay open a bit, it will find you.
I like that. It will find you. How about you, Marshall? What is your
Well,
view?
the one thing I learned from Sally in our book, I think is very helpful to younger people. That is a concept that I'd never heard before I met Sally. And it's called, don't sacrifice your career for your job. So what happens is a lot of people, especially women, get so focused on doing a great job, they actually end up sacrificing their career.
Interesting.
It's a great concept, and it's a counterintuitive concept. Because we tend to think, if I do a great job, I will have a great career. Well, not necessarily. And what happens is, especially with many women, they get so focused on doing this perfect job. Everything has to be perfect, every second. Then they take a job that's 95% quality and try to move that to 99. Which requires about as much work as to get to 95.
A lot of effort, actually.
A lot of effort, and they might be better spent taking that time developing their career, looking at the future, open to alternatives, building relationships. I can give you a couple of stories from my own life. When I was young, again, I met Paul Hersey, and he was kind enough to get me started, and I made a lot of money. One day he called me and he said, "You're making too much money." I said, "What do you mean?" "You're running around selling days like a chicken with your head cut off." He said, "You're very successful and you have happy clients and you're making a lot of money. You will never be the person you could be. You're not doing writing, you're not doing research, you're not thinking of the big picture." He was right. If I had to live my life over, the 10 years I would have done a little bit differently. He was exactly right. And it's very important. I did a program for the New York Stock Exchange. These two bits of knowledge really changed my career. And my friend Rick Culley was there. He's also a member of our group. Sally knows him. And he was head of leadership development for the Stock Exchange. And I did a program, got ranked 4.8 out of 5. And I said, "How can we make it better?" He said, "You're asking the wrong question. You ought to be asking, how can you make yourself better? How can you do more important things? How can you do reading? How can you do writing? How can you do research? How can you make more of a big difference than just trying to improve this program from a 4.8 to a 4.9? He was so right. So it's very easy to get lost in what you do, that you forget what's the big picture. You don't spend time on education, on building relationships, on looking at what's out there. The other thing is I teach people in transition all the time. I just did a program 2 weeks ago about very, very distinguished people, and the topic was, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
What are you going to do for the rest of your life?
Yeah, this is CEO of Pfizer and the president of the World Bank and the head of the New York Public Library and owner of the Utah Jazz. Very, very distinguished people. Yet going through transitions. What are you going to do now? Sounds easy. It's not easy at all. The higher up you are, by the way, the harder it gets.
Yes.
You can get a job, thinking I'll get a job in 5 minutes. Point is, you got to get a great job.
Yeah.
You can't go from being president of World Bank to some mediocre job. It's no good. You have to have a great job. And it's hard. It's very, very hard. So I teach people, be open, as Sally said, be open-minded. Always look for opportunities. Offers are good. You can always say no. But you know one thing I've learned? You can never reject a job offer you do not have.
Yeah.
So, get those offers. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to.
Yeah.
Once you get an offer, though, you can negotiate, too. You've got some power. But you can't reject offers you don't have. A lot of people say, I'm not going to do that, or I might not like this or that. Well, I tell them, you don't have some offer. What are you talking about? Who cares you wouldn't like it? Nobody asked you to do it anyway. So, yeah, once people start asking you, you can reject offers. But people, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do this. Yeah, how do you know? Nobody's asking you. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
So, go out there and get some offers and see what happens. And if you're open-minded, for example, the people I work with, maybe they say, well, I wouldn't like a nonprofit. Well, maybe some nonprofit they would like. I wouldn't like to be a college president. Well, typically maybe, but maybe they would.
Yeah.
So be open-minded. Be open-minded and look for different things and be open-minded and always be looking around for the new offer. And don't feel locked in to where you are, because then you just get stuck.
Yeah. And sometimes the past success can come in the way of looking for future possibilities.
Exactly.
Super successful people.
Mm-hmm.
Sally and Marshall, what led to the genesis of How Women Rise?
Well, How Women Rise. Marshall has this great template, this brilliant idea that what the very behaviors that got you to a certain place in your career, in your life, won't necessarily get you to the next place. And I'd often thought about how that applied to women, but I thought about it in a more general way. And then a couple of years ago, we both got an email from a mutual friend. The tag on the email.
Out of the sky.
Yeah, out of just, who knows? It was a guy, we don't even know him very well.
And he's a mutual friend.
Yeah, he's a mutual friend, but not particularly anybody we know that well.
Yeah.
More mutual acquaintance, colleague. And it had the subject line said, crazy idea. And he said, Sally and Marshall, why don't you collaborate on a book with the idea, based on the idea of what got you here won't get you there, but for women. It would be different because a lot of the behaviors were different. I think he was doing some work with the women's leadership. I'm not even sure. So I saw that and I thought, that's the best idea I've ever heard, at least from my perspective. I can't think of anything I'd rather do. I wrote back and said, great idea, Mike. If Marshall's interested, I am very on. And a couple weeks later, I got greetings from Leningrad or wherever you were from, wherever you were at the moment, and you said, yeah, let's do it. And so that resulted in How Women Rise. And one of the things that Marshall had said is that he'd been doing some programs for women with his book Triggers, and that he had begun to have an awareness that some of the behaviors in what got you here won't get you there were, to some degree, more appropriate or more typical of men. And I had certainly seen it in the workshops I'd done. One of the behaviors that he has in there is learn to apologize. There's nothing, there are a lot of women who can't even open a door without saying, I'm sorry. So that's not exactly usually that big a problem for women, or, don't always talk about how great you are. A lot of women don't do that. So we decided to really focus on that. And one of the things I think that was so wonderful about the way we worked very well together. We had a lot of fun. We just basically shared stories, and I did them from the workshops that I've been doing, women's leadership workshops for the last 10 years. I just had a rich archive of stories, and Marshall had a lot of stories from his coaching experience. So we just sort of put that together and identified these behaviors, and the book came together really quite beautifully.
And also, Sally is an excellent writer. See, I didn't write that book. She wrote the book. I just contributed a little. She's the author of the book. My 3 bestsellers are Mojo, Triggers, and What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I didn't write any of those books. I work with Mark Ryder, a wonderful fellow. So it's good to know your skills. I mean, I'm a good writer. I'm not nearly as good a writer as Sally is. She's an excellent writer. So I can say this without bragging. The book is incredibly well written. I didn't write it, so I can say it without bragging. And we started talking about, I did several programs for women in leadership, which is kind of odd. I don't know. I'm frequently the only man they ask to do these programs. I think maybe it's because I'm a Buddhist. I think he's a little weird anyway. He's a Buddhist. And toss him into the women's program.
On that calm and composure you
whatever,
have on your face
I don't
all
know.
the time.
Who
Marshall.
knows? Who knows what it is? But anyway, then we do these women's programs. And the one thing I've really learned that struck a chord with women is women, number one, too perfectionistic and more guilt. These women need to let go of guilt. And that perfectionism and guilt thing, I mean, I look at your face, you might even...
I was trying to hide my expression though. Yeah.
Tattoo put on your forehead, perfectionist, right? And also women in general, this issue of guilt.
Yeah.
Yet Indian women, bonus guilt for you. Yes, Indian women get bonus
It's
guilt.
like Marshall is reading my mind right.
Indian women, bonus guilt for you. You see, you don't just have to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect daughter, the perfect friend, the perfect boss, perfect colleague. You get to be the perfect daughter-in-law. And let's face it, are you really ever good enough for our little prince? No.
That's correct.
So I think there are even TV shows about this in India.
You watch them? You should.
Yeah. So anyway, this is Indian women get more than your fair share of guilt. So the one thing I've learned that I brought to this is really focusing on helping women get over that guilt and perfectionism and all that nonsense, and lighten up. Don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah, Marshall has always said that he has never worked with a woman in coaching, no matter what she was, a college president, a Congressional Medal of Honor winner, a corporate CEO, where he hasn't had to at some point say, don't be so hard on yourself. And that really had a big impact on me in thinking about this book. And I think we really nailed it with the behaviors.
Yeah.
They're very common, and they get a lot of endorsement. The book came out in the U.S. on April 10th. So I've probably done 100 programs since then, including podcasts and the endorsement that some of those behaviors get is very, very strong. Yeah. And I do see more and more as I work with the material and people with the material, how often the behaviors are rooted in a feeling of guilt.
One thing I'm very proud of is this. It's very hard to write a book for women and not get involved in politics. Left wing, right wing, something or other, right? Politics. In our book, we worked very hard not to do that. And I've been so happy. If you look at the reviews on Amazon, they're almost all positive. Yeah. We only had 1 3-star review. Yet there's no negative political comments, none.
None. Yeah.
And I'm very proud of that. So we worked really hard because what we're saying in the book is, we're not saying you as a woman should want to be a CEO or should want to achieve higher levels. What we're saying, though, if you do want to, and we think it would be good for the world if more women were in these jobs, if you would like to be in one of these positions of authority, here's some things that tend to hold you back.
Yeah.
So that's the whole focus of the book, and it's been very, very positive and well received. And I think one reason is it's not about politics
at all.
And it's not about it's not about what you can't change.
Right.
We're not saying those things aren't important. There are many things in life that are important you can't change. That's not what the book is about. The book is about what you as a woman do have control over, what you can work on changing, and what are some unique and challenging issues that tend to come up for women in leadership, and how to get over these.
Marshall and Sally, one thing which is commendable about this book is, those 12 habits that can hinder women from progress. They are very behavior-based, very actionable, can be seen. And I actually had a list of habits. I'm just very curious to know, of those 12 habits, which would be that one habit that if women start working on, right on, it can really serve as a corrective measure for a lot of other habits, because there are 12. I can get a cue from it.
Well, I think that the behavior that to me gets the most consistent, yes, I have that, is behavior number 2, which is expecting others to spontaneously notice and value your contributions rather than having to bring attention to them yourself. And that's the one I've spoken to audiences where when I ask, I get 90% of the women raising their hand on that one. And I think that that's also one that, because it's very concrete, is, in the spirit of this book, pretty easy to begin taking steps to remedy, to find a way to present what you're doing as information, to identify people who might need to know what you're doing. Send them a quick email about it once a week. Enlist other people in helping you represent what you're contributing. But getting out of that kind of passive feeling that, well, if I do great work, people should notice.
Yes.
Used to hear that a lot. Guess what? They probably won't. Maybe they should. And if it were a perfect world, they probably would. But people, especially today, are really busy. So they're not always noticing what everybody else is doing. And I will hear sometimes women who say that they're not good at this, and I'll say, well, why? And they'll say, well, if I have to act like that jerk down the hall to get noticed around here, no thank you. Well, you don't. It's not an either or. You don't either act like the worst jerk in the whole organization or just keep your mouth shut and hope people notice. You can find lots of ways in between, and I think the book is very strong in suggesting ways to do that. So I think that's probably, the perfectionism pervades things, but I think that that's probably a behavior that's really easy to start acting on, whereas perfectionism is more sort of, to some degree, intrinsic or rooted in character, whereas this is a pure behavior, and you can tackle it.
To this, I have one more question, which I'm curious to know. Who is this? Who is the target audience to which this book serves? Is it that only women should read, or does it have some stake of men as well?
Well, we are getting very good responses from men. I want to bring up something interesting that happened. It happened almost right away. I remember maybe the second day the book was out, and I was in a hotel room in New York doing radio show after radio show. And the radio host, it was a guy, and he said, I see myself in 4 of these behaviors at least. And I have consistently since I did a program in Minneapolis, and a guy came up and he said, well, I'm a physicist, and so I'm more introverted, and I really identify with some of these behaviors, especially on not wanting to claim my achievements and things like that. So I want to stress that I do not believe these are women's behaviors necessarily. I believe they're human behaviors that are most likely, for a variety of reasons, to get in the way of women and hold them back. And that's why we focused on them. So I think on one hand, there are men who identify with some of these behaviors, and they've told me they've gotten a lot from reading the book. On the other hand, I think it's enormously valuable for men who work with women as colleagues, who have women who are their bosses, or who are in a position of authority over women, who want to mentor women, who want to bring them along, make them more successful. It's a great resource for them to really understand how they can help.
And this is not based on scientific research. This is based on anecdotal dialogue. But I've heard this a lot from gay men and minority men.
Me too.
Feeling like, I can identify with a lot of these issues as well. which is, that need to be perfect, need to overachieve. And if you really think about it, if you're a gay man or perhaps a minority man, you might end up with a lot of those same issues, the need of, I have to prove myself extra.
Yeah.
To prove I'm worthwhile. I can't just do a good job. I have to do one level more than a good job.
Yeah.
So I've heard a lot of that.
Yes.
That's not based on research, just anecdote. Yet it's amazing how much that has come back to me.
So, Marshall, I want to ask this question to you specifically. Why people should buy this book, How Women Rise? What's in it for them? Why should people buy this book and invest on this book? What's your message to everyone?
I'm going to talk about different audiences and why they may want to buy the book. First, this book is a very important book for women who would like to achieve higher levels of power and influence in large organizations.
Okay.
And many women have trouble with the term power.
Yeah.
Power can be defined as influence potential.
Yeah.
That's the definition of power. Well, if you want to have more influence, by definition, you have to have more power. Now, we're not saying you should want to have more power. What we're saying, though, is if you want to make more of a positive difference in the world, you need to have more power.
Absolutely.
Well, this book is helpful to help you get there.
Okay.
And I think that's one group. Another group would be, as Sally said, executives who work with women, or coaches, men, first-line supervisors who work with women, to help them better understand unique issues that tend to be true for women. And another group I've seen a lot of positive feedback from is mothers.
Yes.
Mothers who really feel this is good for their daughters and sons, both.
Yeah.
Good for their daughters and sons. And to me, the younger, the better. So this would be a very good book for, a very bright, ambitious 18-year-old girl that really would like to achieve a lot of influence in the world, is very ambitious and motivated. This would be a good book to read at age 18, 19, 21, a young person.
So that they build some perspective about what they're going to witness in the next phase of their lives.
I think it's invaluable for very young women. And we have, book groups that are forming in sororities and in college courses. So I think that that's a really very, very positive sign. And the thing with mothers also has been very fascinating to me, because I didn't necessarily think of it. But it struck me, I was doing a program at a venue where they had a book store on site right before Mother's Day. It was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And how many women bought them also for their mothers. Grown-up women bought them for their mothers.
Very interesting.
And as a Mother's Day present. And then young women buying it for them. It was really fascinating. And I thought, there definitely is something. And I hear this all the time when I give talks. People say, got to give this to my daughter. Got to give this to my daughter. So I think that's... and it's one of the advantages, what Marshall said about it not being at all political or addressing some of so this sort of political issues at all. I think that gives it a commonality that people can share across generations, which is positive.
And people are continually relating to it across all age brackets. That's interesting to know. Before we move on to the next segment, the final segment, which is the rapid fire round, I want to know from you your one-line message to all the female hustlers, to all the women who are managing work, children, marriage, demanding boss. What's your message to all the female hustlers out there?
Your mission in life is to make a positive difference, not to prove you're right or to be smart. Every decision is made by the decision maker. Make peace with that. Make peace. If I need to influence you and you're the decision maker, one word to describe you is called customer. One word to describe me is called salesperson. You don't have to buy, I have to sell. Sell what you can sell. Change what you can change. And then make peace and let go with what you cannot sell. Make peace with what you can't change. Focus on what you can do. And as I said earlier, keep focusing on the opportunities out there. And if you get stuck in a situation that's unfair or the people are not going to give you a fair chance, You don't have to leave immediately. Leave. Just leave. And you're not going to win them all. Just leave and go someplace else. And the world is becoming much better for this.
Yeah.
So the world is going to give you more places to go now.
But the thing is that the women needs to decide that.
That's right.
Sally, how about you?
I think the main message I would give is don't try to do this alone. Enlist help. Enlist help at every stage of your career. Enlist often. I see women will come into a new position and they'll say, oh, I'm going to spend the first 6 months just really keeping my head down and trying to learn the job as well as I can, and then I'll start building the relationships. It's too late then. You want to start building them from day one.
Yeah.
So I think the more that you can enlist people in helping you think about what you want to do, in being kind of a posse for you, being allies for you, having a crew, as one of my colleagues calls it. The less lonely you'll be, the more ideas you'll have, the more feedback. One of the reasons I think the book's so successful is it's got a great template for changing behaviors. And the real heart of that is enlisting people to help you change. Ask for feedback. Ask for feed forward. Thank people for what they do. Take suggestions. Advertise that you're trying to change. So I think don't try to do it alone, and to try to bring people along. Make them part of your circle. Really cuts down on that feeling of loneliness and isolation that has been historically a very difficult thing for women when they're at the top. I remember when I decided to stay in New York City and with the job I had, and I remember my mother saying, "Oh, I hope you don't end up one of those lonely, successful women."
And I think people have notion about success, that if you are successful,
Right.
you'll be lonely.
A lonely,
Yeah.
successful woman. And part of me kind of liked the idea. I saw myself in a penthouse apartment walking around with heels, being very lonely and successful. But the other part of me was really frightened by that. And I think that women have had to struggle with that idea that if you're going to be successful, you're going to be lonely.
Yeah.
So change that. Bring people in.
Bring more allies along
Yeah.
with you. All right. I think this has been by far one of the most thoughtful conversations I've had. Thank you so much both for coming. And now comes the fun part. Marshall, fasten your seatbelt. And I'll start with Sally first.
We had a funny seatbelt story.
Yeah.
I travel too much. So my wife and I would go to the symphony.
1 second. Talking about travel, Marshall, how many miles you have garnered over the years?
On American Airlines alone, over 11 million on one airline.
He's going to give those miles to me, guys. I'm telling you. Yeah.
So anyway, my wife and I, we go to the symphony, right?
Yeah.
Which I normally don't do, but somebody was gone, they gave us a seat. So we go, they had these big chairs. So I sit down, I'm going like this. So my wife, Lyda, goes, well, what are you doing? I said, I can't find the seatbelt. You know what she said? The symphony doesn't move. It's okay.
Chronic traveler that you are.
Too many airplanes, right? Yeah, the symphony doesn't move. It's all right.
I've been eyeing on Marshall's miles. I'm like, I'm going to ask him to give those miles to me for my travel. Okay, Sally, beginning with you.
Okay.
So the game is very simple. I'm going to say a phrase and you have to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind.
All right.
All right? Ready?
Yes.
Success.
Loneliness.
The only guilt.
Sorry.
The only guilt.
The only guilt?
Guilt.
Guilt. Women.
Interesting. Biggest lesson of life.
Breathe.
Happiest moment.
With my nephews.
A treasured memory.
My family.
Friendship.
Many.
Okay. You did really well. But both of you are not competing, so there is no prize. But let's see, how does Marshall fare in this round? You did really well. The answers were on top of the mind. So congratulations. Marshall, The first thing that comes to your mind when I say friendship,
Sally.
leadership,
Paul Hersey.
passion,
Me.
life,
Be happy.
women,
Be happy.
balance,
Be happy.
family,
Family. Reach out.
Ridima.
Be happy.
Thank you so much, Marshall and Sally, for coming on my show. And all the viewers who are watching us on our show, it's a simple reinforcement and the message that if you're not succeeding, if you're not feeling, if you're failing too often, don't worry, you're on the right track to succeed. Because you know what? Failing and trying is much better than giving up. So thank you once again, guys. It's been a pleasure and privilege hosting you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.